Hi there again, and welcome back to another political commentary on my channel, Caribbean and Latin American News Now. And thank you for having gotten me to 50 subscribers when I checked this morning. It means, therefore, that you are enjoying the content. I admonish those of you who have not yet subscribed to subscribe to the channel so that we can grow and we can render effective news on and commentary on the Caribbean and Latin America. Now, we are continuing in the series of the Maduro government and the fact that geopolitical development that we're seeing in Venezuela and the Caribbean at large is going to affect us. It's going to affect the region and what we think of our sovereignty at the moment. So my topic for this afternoon, whenever this video reaches you, I think it's going to reach you in the afternoon. I think is regime change in Venezuela, Jamaica, and Guyana silent as Caribbean militarizes, right? So we did see a very, deafening silence of Jamaica, or here, I should say, deafening silence of Jamaica and Guyana because they were in the throes of an election. Both countries had their general election. Guyana held its general election on September 1st and Jamaica on September 3rd. And both the incumbent governments of those two countries have emerged winners. So Dr. Irfan Ali, congratulations to him and his party. He has won the election, and in Jamaica, the JLP, the Jamaica Labour Party, also won that election. So we are not sure if that's one of the reasons or the main reason for which both countries and both of their leaders have been silent on the development in the Caribbean Sea with the warships sent by the United States of America in their attack against the president rather of Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela. Now, this is something very interesting and something that we need to watch and we need to pay careful attention to, even more so than the general elections, though important they might be. Is Venezuela on the brink of regime change? The Caribbean region is seeing a growing military presence with warships being developed and deployed, yet Jamaica and Guyana remain silent. In this video, we break down the geopolitical implications for the Caribbean, analyze the silence of regional powers, and explore what this could mean for Venezuela and the wider Latin American community. Stay informed on critical regional developments, regime change threats, and the growing militarization of the Caribbean. Now, we have seen where Trump is actually militarizing the United States of America as we speak. We've heard of the National Guards being deployed on the streets of Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States. And Trump's also desire to send the National Guard to Chicago, to New York, and to other states around the United States of America. Now, if the United States is militarizing its own shores, suggesting that they are launching an attack on the drug, it's a war on drug, right? That they are seeking to dismantle the drug networks and also the criminal elements within the United States and around and in the region at large, the Caribbean and Latin American region, then we ought to really pay attention. We ought to pay attention. Now, there are individuals, there are detractors who say, yes, whatever they want to do to reduce crime and to reduce the trafficking of drugs, because both are Siamese twins, that they're connected, they're interrelated, drugs with crime and violence. Okay, so it means, therefore, that people will applaud the United States for doing that. But is that the real interest of the United States? Is it to dismantle the drug traffickers and the drug trafficking networks, and also the criminal elements that proceed from the trafficking of drugs? I don't know if that is true. There are lots of allegations that the United States wants to monopolize, as it were, the drug trafficking business and industry, so that there will not be any other competitor in that industry. And that is what we're seeing happening. We're not suggesting that Nicolas Maduro might not be involved. I don't know. But there are so many things that are happening in the region and worldwide, including the United States, that should preoccupy us. And we should know that there is no innocent or moral upright person or politician versus the one that is immoral. as the United States is suggesting. Now, there is also something that should be of concern to us. Shouldn't the people of Venezuela be the ones to decide whether or not they want to indict Nicolas Maduro? But we are suggesting, what the United States is suggesting, is that Nicolas Maduro, in their eyes, has already been indicted and that he is guilty. And the United States is also calling anyone who is linked to or involved in the trafficking of drugs and also criminal networks as terrorists. Now, we've heard that, you know, playbook. We've seen this playbook before. We've seen what happened in Iraq, not yet in Iran, but about to happen in Iran, okay, Guatemala, Chile, all of these countries that have always gone against some of the policies of the United States, that the United States has branded them as terrorists. It happened after 9/11. And the Bush presidency, that's George W. Bush, said, you're either with us or you are against us. Fast forward to 2025, I think that, what's his name? Marco Rubio made some very troubling pronouncements in Ecuador, in which he says that Nicolas Maduro is guilty, and he says that the Caribbean region and Latin American region will help him to ensure and to apprehend all terrorists, because of course, as I suggested before, he's linking anyone who is connected with drug traffickers or drug trafficking. And it could be just allegations, because as we're suggesting here, Nicolas Maduro has not been tried in an international court for the court to pronounce that he is in fact involved in drug trafficking. All we're hearing are allegations. But the United States is suggesting that once they have made that pronouncement, that it is what it is, and they're correct, and they don't care what the world has to say, including the courts. So we're hearing also people who are opposing some countries in Latin America and the Caribbean region. And I found it very interesting that Belize and Barbados and other countries in the Caribbean region, CELAC, who are part of the CELAC community, are suggesting that the United States should be promoting peace and not threats in the region. Now, let me say here categorically, we understand that it is customary for the United States to monitor what is happening in the Caribbean seas. But what is not customary is for them to be sending warships that are threatening a particular president or prime minister in the region, as they're doing with the likes of Nicolas Maduro. That is something that is unprecedented in the Caribbean region, and people are suggesting people are becoming very, very uncomfortable. Now, the Trump administration, Reuters is reporting, has said it can use the military to go after drug cartels and criminal groups, and has directed the Pentagon to prepare options. So he said that the United States can use the military to go after drug cartels and criminal groups. So if there are criminal groups in Jamaica, if there are criminal groups in Brazil, if there are criminal groups wherever they are found, the United States can go into these countries and apprehend them. And even the laws do not necessarily accord with what the United States is doing. And that is something troubling. That's a troubling statement to make. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio traveled to Doral, Florida, on Friday to visit the headquarters of the U.S. military's Southern Command, which oversees operations in the region. So SOUTHCOM is what governs our region, Latin America and the Caribbean. David Smilde, a Venezuela expert at Tulane University, said the military moves appeared to be an effort to pressure the Maduro government. So the United States desires to pressure. It doesn't necessarily want war, but it suggests that it wants regime change. Now, war might be the last option, but it's doing everything in its power to pressure the government of Nicolas Maduro to rescind and also to, to leave, to exit office. I think what they are trying to do is to put maximum pressure, real military pressure on the regime, to see if they can get it to break. That is what the United States, that's psychological warfare. It's gunboat diplomacy. It's old-fashioned tactics, he added. Okay, and that is what this is an old-fashioned tactic. Now, this is something very interesting that is being reported here in Reuters. While the naval forces are in the Caribbean and the Atlantic, the Pacific Ocean is the bigger route for maritime trafficking of cocaine. The United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime said in its 2023 global report on cocaine, citing figures from the US DEA that shows 74% of cocaine flowing north out of South America is trafficked over the Pacific. So why? Why are they focusing on the Caribbean region when the majority of the drugs is trafficked over the Pacific? Okay, that is what we need to ask. We need to ask these questions. And I think that we need as Caribbean members. Now, people are suggesting that they can remain neutral, and it's important for Trinidad and the Caribbean to remain neutral. You can't remain neutral because, as the United States suggested before under George W. Bush, and it has not changed, is either you are with us or you are against us. And if you are against us, you are going to feel, he didn't say that, but I'm suggesting that you are going to feel the brunt of the angst of the United States and its military empire. So our prime ministers and presidents are very, very careful not to side with the US. All right, they have to. For all intents and purposes, they have to. They have no other choice. And that's very important that we understand that. Okay, now there was an article coming out of this paper here called the BDF, Latin American Leaders Urge US to Withdraw Military Ships from Caribbean. In an emergency virtual meeting held on Monday, ministers from the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, CELAC, denounced the deployment of US military vessels near the Venezuelan coast. Convened by the Colombian government, the meeting reaffirmed, that the US military presence in the region poses a threat to peace across Latin America and urged the United States to withdraw its troops. For CELAC members, defending the region as a zone of peace does not mean ignoring political differences or downplaying the presence of organized crime. Instead, the group advocated for an approach based on cooperation between national institutions, police, and judicial systems. And that is how diplomacy works. That they should have gone through the system. In fact, the United States should have invited Nicolas Maduro to a table where they can actually discuss the matters of concern. Colombia's foreign minister, Rosa Villavicencio, stated that mutual respect between nations must remain the backbone of international order, while acknowledging that freedom of navigation is a recognized right under maritime law. She criticized the US government's increasingly hostile rhetoric. We recognize that the presence of warships in international waters is protected by freedom of navigation under maritime law, but we also recall that all military activity must be conducted without threats or acts of force. The line between presence and coercion is easily crossed when belligerent rhetoric prevails. And that is what we're seeing. But we're hearing these threats coming out of Washington, D.C. For example, Caroline Leavitt, a spokesperson for former President Donald Trump, recently stated that the United States would use full force against Venezuela. Prior to that, the US State Department increased the reward for capturing President Nicolas Maduro to about $50 million US, reiterating without evidence that he leads the so-called Cartel of the Suns, a criminal organization for which no official documentation exists. So this is what they're saying. You have to go through international law, through an international court that the United States has failed to do. In fact, Marco Rubio is on record of saying that he doesn't care what the international law has to say. He doesn't care what the United Nations has to say. It's whatever the United States administration says that will go. And I think under Marco Rubio, who has been a very anti-Venezuela, who has always embraced an anti-Venezuela anti-Venezuela sentiments due to the fact that one, he doesn't like the socialist agenda, and that Venezuela is also aligned with Cuba in terms of their socialist orientation. So he wants to see under this regime, and the fact that he's the Minister of State, the Secretary of State, he wants to ensure that under his tenure, during his tenure in office, that this government is deposed and perhaps socialism in the region is denounced. Okay, that is what they are seeking to do, because this is all about crony capitalism and the control of the nation's resources. And I understand that in addition to oil, Venezuela has a lot of natural resources, including diamonds. So the US wants that because its purpose is to achieve full spectrum dominance. That is what the United States wants to achieve. It doesn't want any competitor. It doesn't want any territory to control any of the resources that it has. Because if it wants control of the world, the United States understands, if it wants to be the new Rome, that it has to be an iron power and that it must control the world, because all roads should lead to the United States of America. Remember, we talk all roads lead to Rome. It's the same thing. It's the same sort of ideology, that all roads need to lead to the United States, to Washington, D.C. Okay? In terms of your economic resources, your political ideologies, everything should lead to Washington, D.C. So what we're seeing in the United States is being used as a playground, where we're seeing that its own citizens are enemies of the state, and anybody who does not concur with the foreign policies of Washington, D.C. will also be branded a criminal, hence a terrorist. And that is something that we have to really be careful. Are we living in a democratic world, or are we seeing the rise of the second beast that the Bible spoke about in Revelation 13? This is the second beast that started out like a lamb-like beast and is speaking almost like a dragon, suggesting that you don't have any democratic rights. You do what we say and not what we do. So the United States has militarized its foreign policy. It's no longer a foreign policy dictated by diplomacy. It is dictated by military might. And if you don't do what we say, then we have to remove you by force. Okay? Irrespective of what international law might say or might not say, we're going to remove you. And this is the United States that we have seen now coming into being, as the Bible had predicted, the dragon-like power, the second beast of Revelation 13. Okay? This two-horn beast that, came up like a lamb, innocent, with a constitution that is second to none, unparalleled in the world's history. Okay? And yet now it is seeking to eradicate all of its principles, the principles outlined in its constitution, and taking on now a dragon-like demeanor and disposition. This is what is happening right now. We have to be concerned, and we should be asking, Jamaican citizens should be asking their government, what do you say? What side are you taking? The Guyanese need to ask their prime minister also, what side have you taken? What is your understanding of the development? Because we should be taking principled act and say no to war and yes to peace. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you'd like, share, and subscribe, like the videos, and share them so that they can be shared with as many people on the platform. Thank you so much. See you in another video. Ciao.